children and youth, and other social considerations. This evening we continue our discussions, and at this time we are going to be looking at the economic considerations. My task is simply to introduce our moderator for this evening, following which our moderator will introduce the rest of the panel. Our moderator for this afternoon session is Mr. Lester Arndell. He is a retired banker with 34 years progressive financial services experience in commercial and international private banking. His executive profile includes senior manager and board directorship with the RBTT Bank, general manager at the Grenada Airport Authority, and most recently, general manager at the Grenada Distillers Limited. He also served as president of the Grenada Chamber of Industry and Commerce, serves on the board of General Broadcasting Corporation, and a past president of the Rotary Club of Grenada, 2018-2019. Please join me as we welcome Mr. Lester Arndell.
Welcome, my audience, and to those who are with us via Zoom. Earlier, Professor Antoine clarified for us the twin challenges of decriminalizing versus legislation. It is clear that the process is one of transformation, moving from containment to commercialization. Success or failure in this process depends on the process itself and how stakeholders are influenced to participate, among other challenges that would unfold. A distinguished group of panelists will be presenting on the economic considerations in this interstate actors panel discourse on marijuana. I'd like to introduce my panelists, and as I present them as speakers, I would go more into the bios. Firstly is Dr. Stephen Fletcher, followed by Mr. Kennedy Roberts, and followed by Dr. Patrick Antoine. Now, my first presenter would be Dr. Fletcher. Dr. Fletcher is a consultant and strategist in marketing and business administration, and is a former ambassador to the European Union. I think most of us will be familiar with Dr. Fletcher in his recent discourse on the GCNA and the GCNA merger, COCO merger. I would like to introduce and invite Dr. Fletcher to begin his presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Arndell, and good afternoon to everyone here. I must say up front that I will depart almost immediately at the end of my presentation, but we'll be back for questions within 15 or so minutes. Let me thank the organizers for inviting me to be here and to share my thoughts on this very important issue that is based again in our agricultural, the nature of our agricultural society and influence our overall national development. My topic is economic and institutional considerations for the cultivation and production marketing of high value marijuana, cannabis, and its byproducts. The subtitle is Ganja Farmer and Ganjanomics. Yeah, Queen Hedderton, right? I am standing on the report that we have been discussing, which is the CARICOM report, and in particular, I will like to make reference to two relevant paragraphs of that report. It says that some participants, including young persons, express their desire to enter into this new market economy. No longer will our most potentially productive youth be criminalized and jailed for their involvement in a niche market that was criminalized by historic accident. I'm not sure about the last two words, historic accident. That's one part of the report that I probably need clarification on. It was probably more deliberate than an accident. So the report aptly raises the issue for our purposes of the tensions that are likely to arise between the small local farmers and the entry of the larger farmers, including foreign investors and foreign companies. This is a real issue that exists, and with other sectors of our national economy, and no doubt marijuana will not be the exception to this kind of involvement. So the report, among other things, in its main rational aspect, the main aspect, point F, called for greater awareness of the economic potential of cannabis, marijuana, and increasing opportunities for international and local business. Certainly, this is important for us to do this. It's important for us to look at it within the context of what are the economic and business challenges that would arise once actions have been taken to provide the legal space and the legal infrastructure for the development of businesses. In my humble opinion, I want to put on the table at this outset that any move to develop any product, whether by decriminalization or we may have to move to legalization, it has to benefit the small man. It has to benefit the small farmers and the persons who have borne the main point of prosecution during the criminalization phase of this product. It's an opportunity for us to breathe. It's an opportunity to get the feet off the necks and allow us to breathe. And we must not lose this opportunity by not coming together as small farmers and as small business people to protect that part that we have fought for. And I'm putting we in the sense that as small farmers. I'm paralleling this situation with nutmeg farmers and cocoa farmers, in which case that you had to form associations of nutmeg and cocoa producers so that the small farmer that can only sell 10 pounds of nutmeg or 50 pounds of nutmeg benefited from a price perspective in the same way that a large estate owner that is delivering 5,000 pounds of nutmegs per annum could benefit. The report, in fact, in order to address this issue, proposes three models: decriminalization, full legalization, full legalization of marijuana for sale and use with state control. The third model is full legalization within a competitive market frame. I wish to add one part to this, which is to go for legalization, but with a regulated market. It has to be regulated. It cannot be open and free to all because of the downside and the negative consequences that we have heard so far this morning. So, in proposing this option, I am really looking at what, although their history are different, which is cocoa and nutmeg, they did not acquire any legal status. They did not have to deal with negative consequences at the same level of as marijuana or as ganja, but it provides from an institutional point of view. Mark my word, from an institutional point of view, we can learn some lessons of how we can develop a business organization, a business association that seeks to protect the small man and allow the small man to benefit from an enterprise in which is, as far as we are concerned, and as estimates shown, is a multi-billion-dollar business soon to reach the trillion-dollar mark. So why am I saying this? Let's look at some market considerations. The global market is huge. In the United States, for example, it is estimated to be reaching overall $9 billion, US $9 billion. In Canada, the estimate is 2.8 billion. Yeah? And that it is expected to grow overall to about 9.2 billion in 2025. However, there are some challenges that come with the business component or developing a business model that will adequately address the economic returns and the economic gains from this crop. And the challenges really speaks to what is happening with the banking sector. So I'll pivot to give some indications, as I did at the end of the first session, of what's happening in the banking sector. So for example, in California, despite the fact that there is a legal opening here, there is a legal market, a legal infrastructure for its operations, you find that over 70%, it estimates that over 70% of ganja business is unbanked. Yes, it doesn't go through the banking system. That is a challenge. And I'm going to tie it on with some comments later on. Canada has, of course, emerged as a hub. In our region, for example, Jamaica is at the point where it is exporting ganja oil to Canada. This was possible because the Bank of Montreal, it is reported, can be termed one of the banks that basically facilitates banking transactions by ganja farmers. The challenge that we have, though, in our parts of the world, where we're under the influence and the direction and policing of the FATF, the Financial Action Task Force, and the Caribbean brother of that, the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force, what are the options, what are the possibilities that exist if we are to turn this into a real business model? So this is not just about justice from the law and the legal consequences. The discussion is fundamentally about what is the economics of it. How do we benefit economically from a crop that has gained worldwide market acceptance in an ever-growing market? How do we position ourselves as small island states, as Caribbean states that had suffered the daunting and the full-scale impact of criminalization of this drug? How do we now position ourselves to be beneficiaries? Beneficiaries in an economic sense. Beneficiaries that will allow us to have some economic independence and benefit from a crop that we were once prosecuted for. So there has been endless estimates, again, that showed about the market potential and the market possibility. I want to point out here, and I want to quote the Euromonitor, that has identified some key markets, key growing markets for the TCB oil in particular. In Germany, for example, the market in Germany is expected, and it is the largest, by the way, and it is expected to reach Euro $5.8 billion. In the UK, 2.8 billion pounds, it is estimated to be. In Canada, The oil saves about 153 million Canadian dollars. And that is going. Australia, interestingly, a very sizable market, a very buoyant market. The estimate is that by 2025, it will be $2.3 billion. So the export market potential is there for this crop. However, in looking at the economics of ganja, we must not be overexcited about the potential that it holds. We have to be sane and reasonable from a trade perspective. Like all other agricultural products that we export, marijuana will form part of that, subjected to the rigors of international trading rules and regulations. So even if we were to legalize it domestically, we still have to face the challenges that all export crops face on the international market. What are some of those challenges? The challenges are no different from banana, cocoa, nutmeg. So we have issues of production and productivity, economies of scale, financing, right? These are some of the challenges, and more so, entry barriers in those markets that we wish to enter. Those markets that I've just mentioned, the UK, Australia, Canada, the United States, they're entry barriers. So what does that say for us? We must consider, therefore, our entry into this market not as raw commodity exporters. We have to go up the value chain. So my sub-theme for this aspect to it asks the question, how can we move up the value chain and create clusters? So it's going up the value chain and creating clusters within that industry that speaks to efficiencies and economic gains. It speaks about not remaining at the bottom of the table as raw commodity exporters, but to become value chain exporters. May I hasten to add here that, like the nutmeg oil, ganja oil is one part of the basic processes that are taking place at the primary level. To get to the real high end of the value, you still have to go a little bit further. At the moment, the oil is generating significant revenues. But we have to look beyond the oil, especially in the context, friends, that we are coming from behind the curve. The question is, how can we differentiate our products to make it an appetizing product in the global marketplace? It cannot just be another oil. How can we build unique characteristics into our product? How can we get involved in branding that will give us that differentiator in the international market and make our product an appetizing product, in the same way as we have done with nutmeg and cocoa? We have experience that we can leverage. We can learn from some of those experiences, and we can apply it to this new scheme. So our fundamental objectives, in my view, which is based on sense making, is to ensure that we provide a secure and stable income for persons along the value chain in the ganja business. And this is where the tire will hit the road. What kind of model eventually that will be allowed to be formed, notwithstanding the legal framework? Because the legal framework can exist, but your business model could end up failing because it is not an efficient and effective model. All of us in this room here remembers very much what happened with bananas. The market for bananas existed for us. The rules had changed, but the market existed. The problem is that we could not have met the new conditions of entry into the banana market in Europe. And therefore, we had to get out of that crop. So we have to, as we think of the future of the ganja planter, we have to think of the ganjanomics that comes along with it. To use the word of a gentleman from Jamaica, who I borrowed this phrase from, Dr. Malcolm, that speaks to the issue of ganja, right? So in ending, and I've just been prompted here, thanks very much, because I also have to leave. I also want to make the following points, reiterate what I said earlier on, that there is a financial component to any business model. The ability of Grenada and the Caribbean to inject itself into the global value chain in the ganja business is fraught with difficulties and problems. The key among them is the FATF rules and regulations, which addresses issues of money laundering and the fight against terrorism. It involves issues of compliance. It involves issue of knowing your customers, the KYC rules and regulations. So the global legal landscape still remains challenging for us, even if domestically we may wish to go the full route of legalization. So probably at the end of the day, we may wish to have to consider, as radical as this might be, in order for this business model to work and to be effective, we may have to establish a ganja bank. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in 15 minutes.
Let's thank Dr. Fletcher with a little more life in the applause. We have to release him at this point because he has to pick up his kid. But I'm looking forward to his return because I think this sets the groundwork for a very interesting discourse. Thank you, Dr. Fletcher. Now, my next presenter is Mr. Kennedy Roberts. He is from, and he wants me to particularly note this, he's from Partygrenada, Grenada. A man with a very interesting bio. And he's an instructor presently at St. George's University in Public Health Policy and Management. He holds a BSc Economics from UE, Cave Hill, and an MPH, which is a Master's in Public Health from Boston University. A former acting permanent secretary in the Ministry of Health, and an acting director of Budget and Planning Division in the Ministry of Finance. He wears a political hat also, but I'll leave it for last. He's a former chairman of NIS. He's a deputy chair of the National Democratic Congress, but he says here in a personal capacity. And he's a former senator in the upper house of Parliament. Welcome, Mr. Roberts. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to present here. 1, 2. Okay, thank you. As was indicated, I am here in my personal capacity because I was advised that this is a forum that is non-partisan, but I'm here in the capacity as a health economist who has been at St. George's University for 20 plus years and has been discussing this issue for some time. In the presentation, I will look at a bit of what the CARICOM Commission Report said, look at some of the global directions in which things are going, make some comments on the impact on the supply and demand for marijuana, but highlighting what is considered the social cost, the cost to society, looking at some of the economic impact, and conclude. Unlike my brother who presented before, Dr. Fletcher, I will not be going into the whole international distribution and sale of the byproducts and the value chain, because I see that as something more in the distance. I prefer to dwell on the basic issues that affect Grenadians, the basic economic issues that we should confront now, and leave the later discussion on the export and the high end for us at some later point when we have moved on. What I want to highlight from the CARICOM report is that it is very comprehensive. And for those of you, next one. Yeah. The CARICOM report is very detailed. And I've been saying for months and years since this report has come out that it is important for the government to digest the content of the report, because it gives so much detail that when I hear the cry for more research and more research, I ask the question, did you read the CARICOM report? And invariably, that report is able to clarify a lot of the confusion that people has in it. So it has looked at the legal, the medical, the social, the economic context of marijuana. So I think we have a lot of data from which we can work. The economics, the report also did an economic study for the Commission. So in addition to the CARICOM report, there are some other reports that were done, and there was a specific economic study that was done, and it made reference, and Dr. Fletcher made reference to the three proposals: decriminalization or legalization with state control, or legalization with the market framework. What the report stresses, and has been seen from other countries, is that this is a very lucrative industry. What we have to also look at is that when we look at the costs and the benefits of marijuana, we have to look at it from different ways. And the report goes into several of the areas. They looked at the averted costs of lost wages from arrest. When you arrest somebody for marijuana, and they have to go through the legal system, they're not in a position to work. If they're incarcerated, that is production that the country is losing. The definition of the indicator we use of gross domestic product is the total value of all goods and services produced in the country. So when you have persons being locked up for marijuana, you're really averting the cost of lost wages. You're really losing productivity in your economy. When you think of the costs involved by the police in incarcerating and hunting down people and terrorizing people for marijuana, this is a cost that has dollar value to it. And those resources could be spent on other aspects of policing that can have a much more beneficial aspect to the country. When you think of what is happening in the prison system, the financial costs alone, we're not even going into the mental stresses that we cannot easily put a dollar value to. And over the years, you've had so many people being locked up, and the government, the state, financing the costs of them living in prisons. That, again, can be averted. But also, the report recognizes that once marijuana is decriminalized or legalized, it will set the basis for the government to earn revenue. So instead of spending, they will be earning revenue as a whole. They also indicated in the report that we have to acknowledge that there might be some negative effects with persons who already have health problems, who have genetic problems with their mental health and other health problems, that they can have some negative consequences as a result of use of marijuana. So the cost of treatment has to be factored into the equation. Dr. Amlaru Marshall made reference to the whole issue of accidents, vehicular accidents as a result of driving. This has to be studied more, but we also have to factor in that there might be some costs associated with that. So the economic study concluded that, and it says that savings and additional revenue may be significant depending on the model of liberalization used. And they're saying that in the case of Model 1, which is the decriminalization, additional costs tend to be the lowest, and so the benefits in terms of savings and additional revenue is also going to be low. But to get the highest benefits alongside with the highest costs, you have to look at Model 2 or 3 of legalization across the board. This, what I just went through, is what the report basically said about the decriminalization of ganja. What I will do is go into what is happening at the global level, and reference has already been made to the UN Commission on Narcotics Drug. The UN Commission on Narcotics Drug, the CND, in December last year, removed cannabis from the Schedule 4 of the 1961 Single Convention on Narcotics Drugs. This is one of the most significant milestones that we have to acknowledge, because with the UN now declassifying marijuana as it used to, it now opens the door for governments to take the necessary action, because the Narcotics Commission on Narcotics Drugs have basically indicated that what has been said for all these years cannot be validated, and countries, in my opinion, now has the ability to move forward with the decriminalization issue. Because we're looking at the economics of it, looking at the supply side, we have to acknowledge that when we talk about the supply, it means that how much is available to the market. The price, and this is economics for any product, the price entails the production costs, and in marijuana case, the seeds, the other material, the wages you pay for the thing, the land, whether you rent it or own it, there's a value you have to factor in. Then there's the selling cost, the transportation, the business place that you located, the wages and so. However, while it is easy to calculate these costs, what is more difficult to calculate is the indirect costs, the risk of getting arrested, prosecuted, the risk of having to go in a location where, because of the illegal nature of marijuana, it could be exposing yourself to violence and other risk. These sort of issues will not be factored in if the issue is changed and it is decriminalized. Prices will be reduced if that indirect cost due to the legal nature is done. And of course, the legalization would generate taxes, and the structure has to put mechanisms to control the production and distribution. However, when we look at the demand side, there is also a cost with regards to the demand, because a person who is purchasing marijuana not only have to pay that monetary cost, but they also have to look at the non-monetary costs and the psychological costs of being arrested again. So from the supply side, the person who's selling it have to worry about being arrested, and when you go in and buy it on the demand side, you still have to be worrying about being arrested. And that psychological cost, that indirect cost, you can't put a dollar value to it, but it is significant when you see the end result that a person is actually arrested and charged and jailed for it. What we have to also look at then is the cost to society, what they call the social costs. Things society has to pay for outside of the transaction costs. So outside of that transaction cost, I made reference to the law enforcement costs. But then when a person is arrested, the legal costs, the cost of the legal system. When we think of the negative behaviors in families and communities, Dr. Prabhakar made reference to patients coming and commenting about the family situation. But the family situation and the community can also be looked at from the other angle, the social costs. And I can't help but think of Chris and Trevor Regis. Chris was shot because of smoking a spliff. And when his father got upset, had his mental issues, I guess, to stab police, he was shot. And that cost to that family, can we put a dollar value to it? These are some of the things that we have to think about locally that affects us in terms of dealing with marijuana. But we also have to acknowledge that there's some medical costs and the long-term impact on youth. Over and over, the studies are saying that when your brain is developing, and up to the age of 18, some say 21, there can be some negative consequences. So we have to factor that in, because we have to acknowledge that there are a lot of people out there who have the negative perceptions, and this is one of the greatest negatives about what is being pushed out there, the impact on children. So we have to balance it and make sure that we put things in place, not just for them not to go into smoking marijuana, but put things in place for them to be involved in sports and culture and drama and music and other things in the school system that would divert them from being attracted to marijuana. So it has to be a package of services that needs to be considered, not just decriminalizing, but what you're going to put in place to address the youth. When we look at some of the economic implications, the cost of enforcement was mentioned. Reference was made that you cannot bank monies, proceeds from marijuana because of the illegal nature, so they consider that money laundering. And when you look at the loss in foreign exchange in Grenada, now I sat down with a couple of brethren and we had a rough calculation as to how much foreign exchange leave Grenada on an annual basis because of marijuana. And he said, you know something, we have 60,000 adults in Grenada, and it is felt that at least 10,000 Grenadians smoke marijuana on a regular basis. But there's another 10, 20,000 that would smoke periodically. But if you just use the 10,000 people who smoke, and you say on average, and we know there are different grades and different prices, but they say on average, if you spend $200 a month, and for some people that is a little high grade, and for other people that is a couple ounces a decent thing. If you calculate that $200 a month by 12 months, that's $2,400 a year. By 10,000 people, my brothers and sisters, that is $10 million already. Yeah? The 10,000 people by $2,400, that's $20 million plus dollars. And you say this is the lower end. So really and truly, Grenada can be saving a lot in foreign exchange by producing our own. In conclusion, I want to just touch on a few things that research shows that the properties and impact of marijuana use is compared with alcohol and tobacco. So we can put the similar laws in place that we have for alcohol and tobacco. You can't sell to minors, you can't smoke in public places, and put things in place with regards to that. Everybody is acknowledging the medical importance of marijuana, but what is also very true is that low-income people in poverty tend to smoke more, and they're the ones who tend to be incarcerated more. So the lower income people in our society is bearing a greater burden as a result of the illegal nature of marijuana. But I also believe it is appropriate to remove the criminal records of persons who've been considered offenders in the past. We have to also recognize the historical oppression of users. And in Antigua, the government apologized to Rastafari for the historical prosecution. And I think acknowledging now that marijuana is not as bad as it used to be is an indicator that we should step up and acknowledge that there was a lot of injustice done. We have to put measures in place to protect the children, as I said, but I believe the greatest economic impact for us, we have to, in a structured way, link the marijuana with our tourism industry. When tourists come to Grenada, I don't think we need the 1,000-room high-rise facilities, because I think we can cater for a tourism market that want to come in the community and sit by the river and cook a oil down and go out and fish and catch some marlin outside there and smoke some good little herb, and they know it is done in a legal way, and they're coming back every year as tourists. And I think the tourism industry has to be looked at in that. The linkage with agriculture it is said that when you're planting ganja and you're doing it legally, you're planting more food. You're planting yam and dashing and you're out in the field and you know you could do it in a legal way. Even though it was illegal in St. Vincent producing more food than any other island in the region, and watch their size. We also have to involve the traditional farmers. So we have to acknowledge, yes, it's illegal, people hide in the bush and they plant it all about, but you have to acknowledge that they're real and you have to involve them in one way or the other. But the education program, the consultation is critical for us to move, and I believe the time is now to pass that legislation to decriminalize it and work towards full legalization. But we need serious political will. We do not need a situation where we're bamboos and it being used as a political tool for a vote. We see that as something that is beneficial to Grenada, whether you're supporting one party or the other. And I believe that the dialogue we're having today is one step in the right direction for us to move towards removing that stigma of marijuana and be proud to be producers of top quality ganja. Blessings.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Roberts. Very interesting discourse. And at this time, we would try to connect with Dr. Antoine. Is it? Okay.
Comrades, I'm here. Good afternoon to all of you.
Good afternoon, Dr. Antoine. But let me give you my warm Grenadian welcome and tell my audience a little about you. Now, Dr. Patrick Antoine is an economist by profession, the holder of a first-class honors degree from the University of the West Indies, a master's degree, and a doctoral degree in economics from the University of Florida. Now, he has a very interesting bio, and I would have loved to read everything on it. But I'm sure he wouldn't mind me giving you a little snippet of it. Now, he has over 20 years experience working throughout the Caribbean, North America, and served as the lead technical advisor at the Caribbean Negotiating Machinery, as well as lead negotiator in agriculture. He has worked with the IAI, which is the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation in Agriculture, IICA, as head of the multinational project Trade and Investment. He presently serves as the chief economic policy advisor to the government of Grenada, and represents Grenada in a wide regional sphere as a Trade and Economic Commissioner to Trinidad and Tobago, an ambassador extraordinary and plenipotentiary, a post he also held over a period 2003 and 2008. I wish to welcome Dr. Antoine to make this presentation.
Thank you very much, comrade. And I think the audience would know that most positions would have obtained until 2018. And as it stands now, I'm very much in Trinidad, unfortunately, and not with you, holding these very important consultations. And so the joy is really mine to be joining with you on this issue, of which at the time, interestingly, to link back to the CV, I would have sat in many of the consultations at the CARICOM level as we sought as a community to review the study that you're looking at today and to, of course, make recommendations. And I had the privilege of being at the heads when the study was finally accepted. In that context, I want to thank all the organizations for this splendid event today, and of course for the way in which we've been able to link up in a seamless manner. And though I have not had the opportunity to follow all of it today, I think being well seized of the makings of the study, I'm think located to make a couple of points which have emerged certainly from my work in the region since, and of course based on my knowledge base of what is in fact a very important topical issue at the CARICOM and international level. I want to say that having heard the discussions this morning, there is a hybrid I want to put to the meeting, which I think is going to be very important for us to recognize, and that is a hybrid that St. Vincent has been following. This is where we're talking about depenalization. Depenalization is where the act above certain quantities, for instance, that are not offenses, those continue to be, as it were, acts that the law recognizes is not in keeping with that which they want to facilitate. I'm using my words very broadly. And so rather than incarcerating quote unquote offenders above these critical limits, what they do is that instead they issue tickets. So there is no arrest and charge and hence no criminal record. And I think that is certainly an important component of what we want to be discussing. I want to make the point though that when we're discussing the economics of this, it's important to understand that depending on the model that you want to pursue, the issue of how you classify this, whether you in fact move to total decriminalization, whether you move to recreational use, will have implications for the model that you develop. So in the case of Jamaica, for instance, they've moved perhaps furthest along the decriminalization spectrum. In the case of St. Vincent, they have wisely adopted an approach of depenalization. And of course, in the model that we've seen unfold there, which I will speak about, there are a number of other interesting lessons for us. And I think that's the first important distinction, because there are also hybrids along the way that helps us to achieve this outcome of social justice, which of course removes the discriminatory and oppressive nature of the laws that now exist that we ought to explore as well. I want to say, colleagues, that my dear friend Ken Roberts made reference to the International Convention, which of course declassified marijuana. And I think while it's a symbolic step, I want to make the point that in the context of what we're discussing today on the economic impact, it doesn't really take us to where we need to go as small states in terms of our linking to the international market. There are a couple of points I want to leave with you. And the first one is that really when you look at the way in which the marijuana issue has evolved, what you have is a number of small states, largely with some reputation behind the industry, either because they have produced for a long time or because it is believed that they have strains of marijuana that are in high demand. There are a couple of countries in the Caribbean and Latin America where that is true. And then you have a number of countries, Canada, North America, in the United States, United States of America, and then you have Europe, that are the big markets. There's some other emerging markets still, but what you have is really large countries with large resources and large land masses with large technology bases, and you have small countries with small land masses where the technology is not as developed and where the capital availability is not as high. These fundamentals have not changed even for marijuana. And so I want to make the following sobering comments. I believe that as the past president of the United States would have said, that the best option for small countries wanting to pursue, this is Barack Obama, wanting to pursue development in the marijuana space is really not to think about connecting to large global markets. Because as he put it then, once you do that, you're going to be opening the door to big pharma. And I heard a colleague speak about that earlier. But he spoke about that essentially a small pharma type niche industry where people have to visit to enjoy and to heal and to recreate and so on from what the small states are able to produce. And in that regard, I want to say that the cross-border trade of marijuana is still a challenge for small states. And that challenge is not going to go anywhere soon. The challenge really is how do we move, even as we've seen the progression, what are still regarded as illicit drugs into a market that is no longer illicit, such as in Canada and the United States, in some states, and in Europe. But how do we actually cross those borders is a challenge. And that challenge, of course, as you know, in the United States at federal level, marijuana is still in fact prohibited and is not easily tradable across the border, although there is some trade between Canada and the United States. But it's not the case, for instance, in Europe and in many of the countries that we've been talking about. And so my third point is that marijuana will not be the silver bullet that many people have held it up to be in terms of trade, cross-border trade, and getting rich quick. The second point is that what we're doing is that we are engaged with a process where we're coming in late, both as a country and as a region. The third critical point I want to make is that what we're discussing today, even with the best will in the world, will entail a lapse between the consultation process, the legislative process, and then when we engage the opportunity. And what we've seen with the countries that have moved the quickest is that that process takes about 3 years. In the case of Jamaica, it took 5. So we're not talking about something that's going to be a quick fix in terms of economic growth. We're talking about something that we're going to have to work at, even if we're diligent, that will take us 3 years or so before we start seeing the performance. The fourth factor, I had the opportunity of speaking at CANEX in Jamaica about 3 years ago. They invited me as a guest speaker to talk about the economic prospects. And at the time, I made the point that I was very cautious about making the forecast that we would see big growth and big developments from marijuana, notwithstanding the excitement around it. I have to tell you this. On checking ahead of this consultation, the colleagues in Jamaica who work in the industry, my colleagues in CANEX and others, are making the point that but for a small shipment to Canada, the performance from Jamaica has been very disappointing to many. I will make another point about the performance, but I want to say the second thing. Ahead of this consultation, I spoke with my colleagues in St. Vincent. St. Vincent, despite the funding that they've put in, and they raised it wisely, is yet to see a dollar come from the new wave of investments coming from the legislation put in place. In short, a lot of what's been taking place is really premised on the old model, and they are in fact getting rid of that. But on the new wave of investments with new money coming into the industry, they have not earned $1 yet. And I think I want to put that there because it's sobering. So colleagues, why would one want to invest in marijuana at this time? And I'm taking this line because I heard Ken's presentation. There's no need for me to get into the social cost. I think Brother Roberts did an excellent job on that. I'm talking about the practical, touchy-feely things where you have people essentially with bated breath, feeling that they're going to do what was done in Jamaica and then in St. Vincent in anticipation that somehow this opportunity is going to lead to easy wins. What we've seen, and I think I heard from one of my research assistants that Mr. Fletcher raised the point about investment. Let's look at what the investment environment has essentially meant for the countries that have undertaken these opportunities based on legislation. That will give us a good pattern to see what our likely economic impact will be. And you've had essentially 3 types of investments, and the ones that come into perhaps the most prominence would have been the private equity funds and the publicly traded companies. And I have to tell you that I'm happy to say to you that those have not worked out well. What has happened is that people have used St. Vincent and Jamaica and Colombia and other places to pump what we call their stocks and bonds. And as soon as they've pumped them, what they've done is that they've essentially sold off at a higher price. So what we call in economics is pump and dump. They've pumped the stocks and sold them off. They have gotten the benefits, but the countries have not been much better off in terms of investments in the sector. In the case of St. Vincent, they engaged 150 firms as investors. They ended up with 8 firms. And of 8 firms, those 8 firms, they probably have 3 serious ones. And where the 3 serious firms have come from, largely from in the region, not from the international markets where people have come in with big stocks and bonds behind it and big promises. And there's an interesting thing that we also need to look at outside of the investment situation. But perhaps I should highlight that what's worked best in investment is small farmers, small capital, and joint ventures. Small capital, small farmers, joint ventures. That's where we've seen most of the performance take place. And of course, even in St. Vincent and in Jamaica, the interesting dynamic now is that the models that's working best is not big capital. It's small farmers, small capital, joint ventures. And the other thing that appears to hold some prospects, let me just go over that quickly, would be loan capital coming from doctors and medical schools and others. But we've not seen the type of performance coming from those either in Jamaica or in St. Vincent. What we've seen is that those universities and funds like that are loan funds, have done better and are doing better in markets in North America and in Europe. I wanted to say that so you know what model's working best for us. The other point I want to make very quickly is that research. We believed for some time that we needed to do more research. I want to tell you this. A lot of the research is done. We believed, for instance, that if we were to do more research on marijuana in St. Vincent, it could somehow act as a fillip, as a driver of competitiveness. This is the news for you today. The research was done by the multinational companies on St. Vincent years ago. They have the seeds. And what's happened, which is actually a counter tendency, is that the producers in St. Vincent and Jamaica are now importing these very hybrid seeds, right, and high performance seeds from these companies in the United States, which is why I think I agree with the colleague before, when she warned about being cautious with the seed companies and big pharma because they can switch the lights off. So I wanted to make that point because I think research is important, but it's not important in the seeds. It's important in the byproducts. It's important in infusion. It's important in niche products. And of course, I will mention one more industry where it's important, and that is what I call psychedelics. There's an industry coming from marijuana from countries that have suffered from this fatigue of being promised that marijuana could in fact lead to substantial better developments. And I'm not talking about democratizing wealth on the ground for small farmers. I'm talking about the big capital. And I'm raising big capital because increasingly there's been these tendencies for big capital to look at markets like ours because they can do some things in our markets that they can't do in the large countries from whence they've come. Big capital has not worked well. But what we've seen is that, for instance, this market for psychedelics is now a market that people are turning to, and they're turning to it as part of the health and wellness and development of niche products. And that is where I think we're going to get a lot of the benefit. But colleagues, to do that, it means that we have to do some things we have not done well before. Because what they're talking about is derivatives of products that we have. Things like moringa. As I heard the colleague mention it before, she's absolutely right. The next Canex is going to be on psychedelics. She's talking about the things like some of the byproducts coming from soursop and things that we actually make already. That's where the research has to come. So colleagues, I want to talk about licensing because who gets the license is also going to impact on how well we do. In the case of Jamaica, the license was given largely to large entities. And when I say that, it is to simplify the fact that the pricing points ruled out small farmers. In the case of St. Vincent, what they did is that they grandfathered small farmers, and they used in St. Vincent a particularly interesting amnesty clause, which allowed the small farm production on the ground of marijuana to be turned into oil, so that immediately small farmers didn't have a gap in income, but they could in fact continue to produce and trade. And in St. Vincent, they did something that's unique. They also grandfathered these small producers and gave them a traditional license. I'm suggesting that what we do in terms of the structure is also going to have an impact on the benefits, who gets the license, and what that license is to do. In Jamaica, they segregated the license into 5 or 6 tiers. In St. Vincent, they recognized that it was better for the small farmer and for the country if the license was vertically integrated, so that when you get a license, you could produce, you could manufacture, you could distribute, and then you could dispense at the retail level. In the case of Jamaica, every license was different. And so what's happened in Jamaica is that rather than empowering a lot of the small farmers, a lot of the small farmers were essentially duped into believing that this new regime would bring tremendous benefits. Many of them invested all they had. And I have to tell you, based on my own discussions and based on my own knowledge of a number of stories, ended up worse off than they were before. I warn again that all of these are things we need to look at in making sure that the economic benefits come. So let me just say the following. What has emerged from the marijuana industry recently in a number of developing countries is actually training specialist workers to work in cannabis and marijuana in North American markets. This pattern, many believe, will also arise in some European markets. In short, what you're doing in St. Vincent, because you realize that you're not getting the benefits. Let me repeat, you're not getting the benefits from the new wave of investments that's coming. But you've done a lot to make the thing legal and to decriminalize by using this depenalization process. A lot of those who would have suffered for having 2 spliffs above the legal limit, for instance. You've done that. But the economic boon that you expected wasn't there. What they've done is that they're now training people from St. Vincent and training people from other countries to work, for instance, in the marijuana industry, because marijuana needs specialist skills. So in the case of St. Vincent and some of the other countries, I have some numbers. People are signing 2-year contracts for $180,000 and 90,000 EC a year. And they're being trained and certified. And increasingly, that's now becoming one of the flows that's also contributing to what's happening in the industry. Let me also say that youth. You want to be able to do this so that the youth population participates. So how we structure the license and the industry must be such that it allows the innovation and the excitement of youth to pour and to flow into it. And that's going to be important. That was done in St. Vincent. Outside of that, it was done in Jamaica, but it was not done well. So colleagues, I want to say the following. As we look forward to the future, I want to be clear. Marijuana has become a commodity. Marijuana is no longer this wonder thing that will take us out of poverty, but marijuana is in fact one of those opportunities if we work well, if we do the research, if we put the regulatory body in place. And that's the other point I want to talk on before I wrap up, because you have to put a regulatory body in place, and then you have to have all of the facilities for testing and tracing. If we do that well, if we do it better than we've done agriculture, better than we've done nutmeg, better than we've done a number of the other things that we know how to do well. If we do that better, then our country and our small farmers will definitely become better off. If we don't put the pieces in place, colleagues, it is not going to be any different outside of what we will achieve in terms of social justice. No different from the economic perspective that we've seen come from a lot of what we have in fact produced before. And I wanted to just say very, very bluntly, because I know there is a lot of anxiety, a lot of expectation, that this calls for a lot of focus. This consultation is important. We need to work more on making sure that the structure, as we put it in place, as we move beyond the issue of how we create social justice by decriminalizing 2 or 3 spliffs, for instance, but to create this as an economic sector, we need to put a lot of thinking into it. The markets of Canada is going to be flat. Jamaica has had one very small export to Canada. The United States will be flat because the political climate will not allow them to remove marijuana from the list of federal substances that cannot be traded across cross-border lines. The European countries are themselves expanding production, and increasingly they want to get raw materials so they can produce the value-added products and export it back to us. And whether we like it or not, there are a lot of those products from Europe in our own markets in CARICOM that are produced from marijuana, although we in our countries, many of us have not yet legalized it. So colleagues, it's an excellent opportunity for the small farming community. It must be embraced properly. And I'm sorry if I have poured some reality on some of this, but I have lived long enough to see great ideas with great prospects not be embraced properly for us to lose the moment. And we ought not to cause this one to follow the same trajectory that many others have followed. So this is where I want to wrap up in saying to you that we need to embrace this with a dose of reality. And of course, Ralph Gonzalez was the one who said, I believe you, I may be quoting him improperly, when he said that there is no pot of gold at the end of the marijuana rainbow. And I want to end on that note by saying, colleagues, that excellent opportunity, hard work, research, byproducts, psychedelic, good agriculture, let's embrace it, let them come to our markets, do what we have to do, but we need to be very, very cautious about how we deal with this. And finally, corresponding banking, we've said I sat on the working group. The world is not going to be open anytime soon to inflows coming in from marijuana into the banking sector. That's one of Jamaica's biggest challenges now. St. Vincent is starting to face that challenge, and they're now starting to gear up for it because many of the banks cannot take the proceeds of marijuana. In Jamaica, they've gotten away because there's a large informal sector. And so you can essentially bring your money in from several things from informal trade, and no one can track it directly. We need, as a small country that's really fragile in terms of our banking commitments, to look at that as part of the mix. And I think Ken and also my dear brother Stephen Fletcher would have mentioned that. I endorse that too. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Antoine, for this very energetic presentation. I think you hit a very interesting point with me. The issue of market knowledge, moving from thinking of marijuana just as a drug, a recreational herb, to thinking about it as a commodity. And when you are engaged in commodities trading, it takes on a very different view of what the world is and who the players are. But thank you for, very much for bringing this perspective to light. So we are not releasing you because the floor is now open to take questions, both from the audience present and those who are listening to us online. So, the protocol for would follow that the person who wishes to place a question would say his name, his or her name, and proceed so that we can have a record of who raised questions and properly identify. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, if I may just make an intervention before we have
Let's give
anybody
Dr. Stephen
yet.
a minute to make an intervention. Yes, yes. So.
Okay. So in my rush states, there were some additional statements which I wanted to make, but I will. I want to add to my friend Patrick Antoine regarding the issue of the exuberance with which we might be looking forward to this this opening up this market as being a panacea for probably solving some of our economic problems. It's not really going to be that. I lay the basis by indicating, like nutmeg, cocoa, bananas, this will face some of the very same challenges that these previous commodities have faced. But let me add to this. In my research on this, my continuing research on this matter, the markets are stabilizing and to some degree declining, the global markets. In fact, in Canada, which is quite a surprise because Canada has been one of the early movers, as we call them, and hub for the consumption of the ganja and its byproducts. Last year, the market declined by 8%. There's been an 8% decline in the market. So, and in, sorry. So we are going to see some amount of that fallout taking place. And like most new products that comes into the marketplace, there is a life cycle of introduction, growth, right, tapering off, and then some amount of decline. So we have to consistently be monitoring the marketplace, monitoring what is happening on the international scene, along with the issues that have been raised before, the entry issues, the technical and non-technical barriers that you'll have to address in dealing with trade. So that brings us to the question as to what extent really there is a domestic market for the kind of value processing, the kind of value products that we may wish to enter into. I do not wish to offer a comment on this right now. It still needs to be monitored, it still needs to be studied, but the domestic market, in my view, will be very similar to that of what we face in any of our commodities right now, whether it's cocoa, nutmeg, bananas, and so on. There are real constraints within the domestic market. The challenge again for small island states is how do we interject ourselves into the global value chain, as we have been encouraged to do by the international organizations like the UN, EU, and so forth, because the domestic market may not offer the kind of dynamic returns that we expect on our investments. And hence my reason for focusing on small farmers, association types, with regulations at what exists for GCNE and cocoa. I just wanted to add that.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Fletcher. So, members on the floor.
Aisha here? Anyone here?
Thank you.
For Dr. Fletcher, especially. Listening to Dr. Antoine and yourself speak, listening to some of the other panelists up there this morning, it sounds like we're still only conversing about smoking cannabis. It sounds like our conversation is surrounding only the female plant. This is a disservice to the conversation we're supposed to be having. Cannabis is made up of two plants, a male and a female. If we continue to converse about this plant solely on the female basis, we will lose. Rightfully so. The market is huge, but it's controlled by a lot of people. We need to have a holistic approach towards legalizing cannabis in Grenada, not decriminalizing it. Decriminalizing, or what was the word that Dr. Antoine used? Depenalizing. Both of those things are stepping stones, which if we end up at is great. However, listening to Dr. Antoine's presentation, especially at the ending, his conclusion, for us to craft and make the best thing for Grenada, which will take in all the account of Grenadian people, that when it's done, we won't be used, abused by anybody, but even by our own selves. To be able to do that, we can't, I think it's a disservice to the movement, to the process, by starting with decriminalization or depenalization. It sounds like gimmicks, when we really should be sitting down and having wholehearted, full-throated conversations about how do we legalize this particular plant in a way that best protects our people now and in the future, based on the history that brought us to this point. I think we're acting from still a fear perspective and making decisions based on fear that, for example, the markets are gonna plateau and shrink. But most of those fears come from a smoke perspective, from a female plant perspective. We're not talking about textiles. We're not talking about pharmaceuticals, nutraceuticals. These are the things that will be able to help Grenada form that niche that we need to be able to be prosperous in this endeavor. To be able to do that, we need to legalize the plant. For whether it's research, development, or whatever, we cannot fully research a plant that is still quasi-illegal. Even though it's depenalized or decriminalized, it's still illegal. And I think framing it the way we have with with fear as its basis will not allow most people in our country to break past that fear. We ourselves have to break past that fear first so people can see that the people that are talking about this aren't afraid. There will be mistakes made. There have been mistakes made, and we need to be cognizant of that. One of the things that we need to, in terms of dealing with the youth, we need to set that under 21, no one should be consuming cannabis without a doctor's and parent consent. That way we take usage by children or minors quasi off the table. Yes, there will be people that do it if, as Brother Awali said, we don't have actual enforcement. If we're not honest about our enforcement, then of course people will do what they want. But that's with anything else. We seem to be still at the point where we're making decisions based on fear instead of, as you said, Dr. Antoine, researching, understanding the pros and cons, and making a decision in spite of the fact that we're afraid of what may happen. Because we did the research to prevent or deal with whatever comes when it comes. I think we have an opportunity to craft a bill in Grenada that actually will be the talk of the world if we do it properly and when we do it properly. However, going into that process with a fear foundation will not allow us to get the best out of this process. We will still end up with the same old thing we had before because we started out with fear. So as I asked Dr. Awali earlier, is there a way, Brother Antoine, is there a way you see, whether it's to converse differently or even in the law itself, to get us to start this process as we're started, but to start it more from a confident foundation than a fear foundation, where we're making decisions based on what negatives may happen instead of how positive things can be?
Dr. Antoine?
His mic is muted. Can you mute his mic?
Okay,
I can give a go at the answer. Now, the brother is asking.
Put your mic on.
Yeah, it's on.
Dr. Antoine's mic is muted.
Yeah, the mic is on. At least the light is on. Yeah, I acknowledge that the question relates to why shouldn't we be dealing with this issue in a much more positive framework as opposed to one focusing on the fears. I believe that historically the whole issue of marijuana was considered so negative that there's still a lot of people who are not comfortable to even talk about it. As a result, those persons who are presenting what you call the negative side of the argument tends to be louder because that's the voice we've been hearing for the longest while. I believe, though, that things are changing. The whole world is recognizing the benefits of marijuana. People are becoming more aware of the history of why this thing was decriminalized, was criminalized in the first place. And as a result, I think we are at the stage now in Grenada where we're lagging behind. And I believe that it is important to do this in a phased way. And that's why I suggest, first of all, let's deal with the basic issues of not harassing people for small quantities. Let us go to the parliament and pass a first draft if necessary. Because I believe if we go to talk about the whole entire package about export and quality and all these fancy things, it will take several years of discussion. But I think the discussion needs to be speeded up now, and this, in my opinion, is what we need to focus on now. What are the specific things we can put in legislation now to ensure that the mental stress associated with marijuana is removed first and foremost?
Yeah, thank you. I think you can hear me now. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we are hearing you now. Yeah.
Yes, I think the comrade raises two important questions, and I want to address them frontally. Brother Williams, rest assured that we have spent quite a bit of time in my little organization doing a lot of work on marijuana. In fact, I asked my research assistant to reach these products for you. I'm sorry you can't see it clearly. Can I share screen, please? If you can allow me to share screen, it might look better. Oh, actually, yes. Let me see. Take off the light. Let me see if I can see it. This is actually from Europe, right? It's a picture. All right, I'm showing you the wrong thing. This is actually a CBD night cream, right? This is another one which is cannabis oil. This is another one which is a cannabis body lotion. All of these were purchased here in Trinidad, right? So I wanted to tell you frontally what the answer to your question is. Is it hypocritical? Yes. Why is it hypocritical? Because if I were to have a regime where I spoke about legalization, the international banking community would turn off my lights tomorrow. So that is not from a position of fear. It's a position of what are the realities of small countries when you are essentially connected to an international finance system that you do not control. You think I can go to Europe or Czechoslovakia and pick up Jamaican body lotion with Jamaican CBD oil in it? Think again. How come I can get all of these products from Czechoslovakia and other countries off of any shelf in many places in the region? We live in an international trading and finance system that is as it always was, discriminatory and oppressive. So what we have to do in that context is that we have to learn to work between the spaces. And the spaces that we have to work in is to realize that the international laws only allow me to have regimes that admit to marijuana for either research or for medical use. And so where you want to get to, I could help you get to that by crafting legislation that talks about medical marijuana. And rather than people smoking indiscriminately, like some people believe is going to happen when this thing passes, to smoke this thing or to use it as a byproduct, because that's where I am. I'm saying that it's a commodity, and if we're not getting here, forget it. That's my thesis today. My thesis is that the value is in the value-added product. When I can mix this with coconut oil and other things and do some crazy formulations that people really want, that's the value of this. Because marijuana is a commodity that we can't compete with Colombia or Uruguay on, or Canada or Oregon. In Oregon, they lost $8 billion because they overproduced. We are only into value added. To get where you want to get to, we can write the legislation so that medicinal marijuana speaks to anyone wanting to use it who must go to a doctor to get a prescription. I want to grandfather my Rastafarian community by allowing the legislation to designate certain places that the Rastafarian community have held firm for many years. The tabernacles, the properties, the farms. I want to put that in the legislation so that it essentially becomes a place where, for spiritual use, you can go there and you're not deemed to be using the marijuana on the street. So I want to get where you want to get to, and my use now is to tell you that already in a lot of places, people are actually producing marijuana cookies and marijuana this and exporting it, and people are actually playing with formulations, not just for edibles, but for other things. So we can get there, wonderful, I'm happy to, beautiful. So we can get there together, but stepwise. We can get there stepwise, but we can't do it in one fell swoop. They will shut off all lights tomorrow, okay?
Well, thank you, Dr. Antoine.
Hello, can I speak?
Hello.
Hi, Dr. Antoine, I love you. My husband should have been here to hear you, as well as Mr. Roberts. Oh my gosh, bang on. My Rasta brethren out there, you know, Abraham, whose wife does homeopathic remedies and stuff, this is what we need to know. This is where we need to go. Hanshil, Chalky, you guys out there, listen, this is where we need to go. You see the legislation from St. Vincent that Dr. Antoine is talking about, where you get to do everything by product. How many times we give the raw material to even agro-processors right here and get pennies on the dime? Yeah? So this is about you being able to create your stuff for yourself. I know that I'm following on Facebook and Instagram, I see a girl doing OMI. I don't know who that is, but it's products out of coconut and cocoa butter and things of that nature. Debbie Mason, another person. Chocolate is one of these infusers, and I have to tell you that was more secret with me. Yeah, chocolate, because it's embedded inside of the cocoa butter and then made into chocolate, and it has a balance to it. I'm now hearing about it. I go to the farmer's market here in Illinois where it's legal, and they sell you salves for my arthritis. Salves. And these are homemade. These are people selling just like you sell spice baskets in the market, which means you could be in that market as well. You don't wait on somebody to own you and then give them. You remember how much we were getting for coconut water in the juice place, the Canadian juice place? We don't want to be owned anymore. What Dr. Antoine is talking about, being free people in a free economy, owning ourselves, as well as Dr. Roberts, what he said is similar to Airbnbs. We already know we have the yachties, you know, the block on Grandad's speech, you know those things are happening. But here it becomes legalized. Yeah, it's no longer, it's that tourism that comes down that you know comes for that all the time. These are hypocritical secrets we kept from each other and scorned men who did that. But we know those who are really prominent people in the society who are also doing it, but there was no scorn. That rust on your head brought a lot of problems. It did for my husband. But here, for the first time, we could be decent people doing a decent thing. Agro-processing is the way to go. Domestic market, you're right, Dr. Antoine, you're right, Dr. Roberts. Yeah? Domestic market is where you start, because I'm telling you, right now in the, Saisha knows this person who had a plantation. It cost them $40,000 in fees to get all the papers and stuff for California. By the time they were reaping and they went to the market flat, done, because everybody was doing the same.
Okay. I want to thank you very much for your contribution there, but we'll have to cut you here because we have to take other presentations. So we are going into our wrap-up session at this point in time. Thank you very much for your contribution. So I just want to make some comments, some takeaway from the presenters. I think this has been a very good discussion on the economic side of this discourse. And I know Dr. Patrick was not the first, but I love his comment about thinking about this business as a commodity business. And that doesn't take away from the presenters that came before in terms of treating the issue of marijuana from the perspective of decriminalization or legalization. That is a social issue. It has significant cost as it is in our present system. The cost of incarceration, of the economic fallouts of having to jail someone, pull them into courthouse, having someone lose their job because they were found with a spliff. I think all these are issues that needs to be built with. And most importantly, people who have a record whether it is be for a single spliff or a 5 pound of marijuana, they are marked for life. And that has a cost in terms of how you proceed with your life going forward. The cost implications are from different perspectives. One is there has to be something lucrative about marijuana use, whether it is from a religious standpoint that it gives you some social well-being, or whether it is that it is a trading commodity. What this discussion is all about is what the cost implications to the country is. The cost implication in this country is that we have to jail people who have, quote-unquote, broken the law. And probably in prisons there are many more persons for minor offenses of marijuana possession who we are converting into hardcore criminals. And that is a cost the country is going to bear for a very long time. Now, there are opportunities that, they say every problem has an opportunity because a problem doesn't exist on its own. It's how you want to look at it. Decriminalizing marijuana has its bounds. It's not a open sepulcher. And I'm listening to the discussion and I'm a little bit more tolerant to the politician walking gingerly into this night, because it has its downsides, it has its upsides, and you have to get this thing right. It's not a question of the taking off all the controls. It's a question as to how you introduce or broaden what I say, the space of freedom. And the quicker we can get to that place, the better it is for every one of us. I don't have to basically dissect the different presentations, but what I would like to say is that this transition and challenge is not one about being coward. It's a transition and challenge. In other words, getting from this place to that place. But the road is not in a straight line. The complexities are numerous. As much as we would like to say many persons want decriminalization, but decriminalization without what I call within a controlled environment. You look at alcohol, for example, and you can ask many wives and girlfriends. They don't mind their husbands or their boyfriend having a drink. But it's the amount that has been consumed and the implication it has for family life. So jumping into that pot with just a banner that says legalize it is more of a fashion, probably a fad, and I just want to concern it. We have to take these things in balanced measures. First of all, we want to have less people being criminalized for marijuana use. So the urgent call is for decriminalization. How we move forward needs other stakeholders' consultation. At some point in time, probably we'll have a deeper discourse as to who the stakeholders are and what it means to them. The stakeholders are not just the people who plant and grow, but the stakeholders are people in the community, and I think Dr. Antoine mentioned it in a way, Dr. Fletcher mentioned it, the whole issue of who controls the financial space and what are they likely to do. And I would like to tell you, in my experience in working in a distillery, a simple issue of buying rum in Grenada and having to change a flight in Barbados, you are likely to lose your rum. So once we think that all is fair and all is bright and everybody should be acting within the same considerations. People protect the space. And it has to be an issue with deep consultation so that we could have a comfortable position. If not, there will be issues where particular section of our small farming society will be marginalized by those who preferably have the financial acumen, they know, they understand the market, and they can operationalize this thing in terms of having our people just being a producer of a primary product and not having any economic or significant economic benefit. So the discourse is to think about this thing carefully. Decriminalization is urgently needed. But how we proceed has to be something deeply thought out. So I thank you very much and make space for the next presenter. So I'm going. You're going to celebrate the bottom. Sandra, give me more.
I'm just locating my stuff. Friends, good evening. Once again, we are coming down to the final panel for this evening. We have already looked at in our response to the CARICOM report on marijuana. We have already been looking at a response in terms of health, children, youth, social and other considerations. We have just heard from our economic considerations panel, and we are going to now turn to our final panel for this evening, which would be the decriminalization, legislation, law, and human rights panel. As we have done before, my task this evening is simply to introduce the moderator for the panel, who will in turn introduce our panelists. Our moderator for this evening's Decriminalization, Legalization, Law, and Human Rights panel is Ms. Rita Joseph Olvetti. Justice Rita Joseph Olvetti is a retired judge of the East Caribbean Supreme Court. She served as primarily in Antigua, Bermuda, and in the Virgin Islands. Her work exposed her to the entire gamut of the legalization process, ranging from family law, civil law, administrative law, and criminal law. Let me take this opportunity to welcome Dr. Rita Joseph Olvetti. Let us welcome her to this evening's panel.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to go straight into what happened? Is that working? Oops, thank you. Hello? Thank you. Sorry for that glitch.
Okay.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I will go straight into our discussion by introducing our panelists. So it is my pleasure to introduce this first speaker, who is Mr. Richie Maitland. Now, I think most of us are familiar with him. He's a lawyer and practicing in the civil bar in Grenada, and he specializes in human rights law. So we welcome you, Mr. Richie Maitland. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Justice Olivetti. Before I discuss the specific human rights issues related to decriminalization of marijuana, I wanted to just provide some context of the actual report which was presented today and the commission. It's important to note that this commission was comprised of a very large number of experts in their fields. Professor Belantoine, who's the Dean of Law, who has a doctorate from Oxford, social policy analysts, law enforcement, including police, mental health professionals, pharmacologists, criminologists, and the average goes through town hall meetings. Among other things, the report indicates that it recommends the decriminalization. They've put together a number of different scenarios, a number of different things that can happen in response to what they've been finding, and they've recommended what they think would be best for particular countries in the Caribbean context, being decriminalization. They've actually been quite specific in what they think needs to be done. So I've been hearing undertones of this argument that, well, there's so much thought that has to be gone into it and so much to be done. It's an extended process. While I appreciate that, I think a lot of the legwork has, in fact, already been done in that regard. Actually, it's probably important to know that, as far as I am aware, in the Caribbean, Grenada is the very last country, the only country that has not either passed legislation concerning decriminalization or made a specific political commitment to doing something. Everyone around us has. Barbados quite recently has committed to decriminalizing by next year. Dominica and St. Vincent have both passed legislation. Antigua, St. Kitts did it through the courts, where a Rastaman took their version of the Drug Misuse Act to court and was successful, which I plan to address later on. So Grenada is the very last. So as much as I appreciate that there are stakeholders involved who need to be a part of this process, I think it is also important, especially if we're thinking about the economics of it, to get on with it, because the longer we wait is the more we lose any competitive advantage that we might have. One of the things the report indicates is that there is actually majority support for decriminalization in Grenada. 2018 survey, according to the report, says 61% of the Grenadian population wanted to remove prohibition as it is, with only 22% wanting things to remain as it were. Now, one of the things that shocked me about the report was the fact that the law enforcement, the police, because the police throughout the region, police forces, commissioners, etc., also interviewed for this process. And they actually have overwhelming support for decriminalization of marijuana. Among other things, they indicate the amount of time it takes up relative to what is achieved. They also, sorry, I'm just notes. Right, they were also making the point that there's essentially no correlation between marijuana and violent crime in that sense. And in fact, looking at things globally speaking, when one speaks about violence and gang violence in the context of drugs. It's the illegality which drives that violence. If we're talking about mangoes being sold and we have a contract for me to buy 10 pounds from you and you take my 10 pounds and don't pay me, I can take you to court. But oftentimes, especially in contexts where it is absolutely illegal, the only resort is for people to take things into their own hands, which drives the criminality. So the report found that according to the police themselves, there wasn't really any correlation between marijuana and crime, particularly violent crime. Now, another thing that the police indicated, which I found was quite interesting, is that poor communities tend to suffer more in terms of law enforcement. It's not particularly that poor people use more drugs or use more marijuana. It's just that police, for historical reasons, which we might all understand, are much more likely to run up on a block as opposed to run up in Lansapine, as we might say. And they recognize that that is an issue and that it might be unfair because it's sort of over-policing already underprivileged people. The report looked at, among other things, incarcerations and the effect of incarcerations, because that's another thing. One's financial status affects what happens. Oftentimes, a person might be fined for a marijuana-related offense, but because they're poor, they can't afford to pay it and they get incarcerated. Whereas, had they been a well-to-do person, they would not have gone to jail. Now, they actually looked at some of the statistics, I believe, in St. Vincent of the Grenadines, where they found that 75% of the total sentenced prisoner population had been given the option of a fine, but had been in prison because they could not pay them. So that's also an issue. We also have the sociological aspect of it, where we have a particular demographic of our society, that is, poorer people being more negatively affected by a law which is supposed to be neutral. And yes, on paper, it might seem neutral, but the police themselves have accepted that in its enforcement, poor people tend to suffer more, which I think is quite an important reason to decriminalize. As I indicated, Grenada has been the very last country. Most of the other countries have gone the route of legislation. St. Kitts is unique because what had actually happened was there was a Rastaman, his name is Ras Sankofa Maccabee, and he was charged under their Drug Act with possession and cultivation, and he decided to challenge the law, which we also can do under our Grenadian constitution. His argument was that the law violated his religious rights as a Rastafarian, and the state brought a whole heap of counter arguments as to why they thought the law was necessary, including the protection of children, etc., etc. But ultimately, the court actually ruled for Ras Sankofa, and they gave the government a number of days within which to fix the legislation. They found that it was overbroad, and in coming to their decision, they looked at a lot of scientific evidence, and they found that exceptions could be made in the law for adult Rastafarians for religious use. And they essentially gave the country so that their parliament could enact laws which reflect that reality. So as I end on that point, and I'm not sure if we open it for questions now, I just wanted to remind persons that whereas it is important to be very careful on taking on something or making changes which are bound to have significant effects for society, it is also important to know that we can't drag on this process forever, and that Grenada is last among its neighbors, and that there is already precedent set, there are already laws that can be drawn upon and tweaked to be given effect in Grenada. It's not as difficult a process as many people would make it seem, is how it would end. So thank you very much.
Than our former Commissioner of Police, Mr. James Clarkson. Now, I have a very brief bio from him, so that reflects, I guess, his personality. He, of course, is a retired Commissioner of Police, and he also served as the bandmaster of the Royal Grenada Police Force. So he has a very deep-seated interest in music. He served in the Defense Force Regiment in Trinidad and Tobago, and of course he was the bandmaster of the regiment band there, not surprisingly. He's a musicologist and also an arranger for the Angels Harp Steel Band for the last 42 years. I don't think that Commissioner Clarkson requires any further introduction. Thank you, Commissioner Clarkson. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson. Good afternoon, everybody. I have been thinking about this afternoon's presentation, and two words stuck out to me. I was thinking, what do I do and what do I say? Maybe some of what I'm about to say, you have heard it already during the day. And the two words are criminalize, legalize. Where do we go from here? I cannot claim to have the good fortune of having all the answers. I have been reflecting on the many lives that have been lost, the many lives that have been incarcerated. Perhaps our hearts are becoming softer towards those young men that got caught up in the justice system. That's what I felt the last couple of days. And thinking how to break the cycle in finding a roadway into a better world for this generation and the generation to come. In order to understand where we are, where we need to go, we should have an understanding of where we come from. The many changes that took place, the different narratives, all in the name of criminalization and legalization. As I said, if we want to walk properly, we must remember the time when we couldn't creep at all. Then we'll appreciate the steps that we're making. During 1995 and 1996, intense pressure, intense law enforcement pressure was focused on the destruction of marijuana. This intense enforcement was spearheaded by the DEA of America, utilizing the forces of our islands, including the RSS, namely, basically, to prevent drugs from reaching the landmass of the United States. Operations were done locally, regionally, and internationally. Locally, lots of manpower were utilized with minimal return, most times with the confiscation of a few trees and the arrest of one or two individuals. Regionally, the RSS mirrored our operation, but at a larger scale. Internationally, the law enforcement of the USA exerted tremendous pressure on the Cali leadership using the brave men and women of the Colombian National Police. As a result, all the top drug trafficking leaders from Cali were either jailed or killed. In combination or parallel to that operation, the law enforcement agencies were effectively attacking Colombian cells operating within the United States. This type of enforcement did not break the back of the drug trafficking, it only emboldened them. As a matter of fact, an alliance was formed between the Colombian traffickers and the Mexican traffickers. In September 1999, the DA announced the conclusion of a two-year investigation resulting in 36 seizures, netting 12,434 kilograms of cocaine, a half a kilo of heroin, 4,806 pounds of marijuana, more than 19 million US dollars, US currency, and the arrest of over 106 personnel. After this period of heavy enforcement, the operation also includes, at that time, the arrest of a head of state in Panama. As we considered what next to do within our small island states, let's not forget, we must be aware of the nature of the change that took place in some states of the US and how it affected us as a nation when it comes to our involvement in drugs enforcement. Due to the legalization of marijuana for one reason or the other, factories were open, drug shops were given license to operate. Our law enforcement within the island started looking inwardly because our jobs at the time was to stop the drugs going to the States. So what started to happen is that quite a bit of the drugs that were passing through the islands remained inland. And that sort of posed a problem to the law enforcement agency. There are no easy or single answer to the question of legalizing drugs, legalizing cannabis. There are pros and cons. The issue can raise strong opinion on both sides of the debate. There's a school of thought that drugs can have an extremely negative effect on both individuals, users, and society. Others say that addiction can be very destructive to the physical and mental and well-being of the user and can lead to problematic behavior. However, most of the focus is whether criminalizing drug use is the most effective way of dealing with the problem, if there was ever a problem. We must look at both sides of the equation. We must look at all the angles, the policy, the laws, enforcement. Some people say that to legalize, but draw a distinction between the kinds of drugs. That would help break the grip on criminal gangs and protect young people. Criminalizing drugs offer a better chance of avoiding or overcoming addiction. Regulate to legalize. As it is now, drug pushers have become very rich. The drugs have become $1 million business. As a matter of fact, some of the most sought after individuals in the drug world were billionaires. And one of the individuals, when they mounted an operation against him, he decided to make a deal. His deal was that, okay, I'll come in, but I will have to build my own jail. And that was accepted. So he built his jail with all the fancy things he had on the outside. He had his parties and he had everything. But as with everything else, he got kind of complacent and decided he wanted to go back out. So what he did, he broke his own jail, which was an easy thing for him because instead of employing his army on the outside, he had the army of the state protecting him. But he went out. So when he broke jail, as in any country, if you break jail, they come to look for you. They went to look for him, they caught him, and he was killed. We ask ourselves, what is the benefit to society? Because when I look at some of the tactical situations with the enforcement, a lot of the people on the smoking the cannabis smoke in front of the law enforcement officers. They have no problem because the saying is that some of the same law enforcement officers smoke the weed as usual. And the funny thing about that is that a lot of them came out from the block. So they're going back on the block. They know everybody on the block. Everybody knows them. So, however, the question of legalizing drugs brings with it a certain amount of taxation because it's a business. If you have a business, you will have taxes. Depending on the taxation, what we call the black market will shoot up. Right? Because if you could break the government tax and sell cheaper and sell more, you make more money. Drug tourism could become a problem. However, with all of this, we must not forget, for those of us who are old enough, we must not forget our custom, our culture. As a young man growing up in Grenada, going to a doctor was always a distance away. We had a building in the community which in those days was known as the drug shop. Today it's the pharmacy, which was hardly ever used anyways. Because for every sickness, my grandmother had some bush she could have gone into the garden and pick and fix you up, regardless of what sickness you have. I could remember my cousin got a big cut with a cutlass. She didn't send him to the hospital. She get a leaf, band his foot, and within a couple days, he was good to go again. My grandmother even had bush for when she was baking. Those days she baked in a mud oven, right? She heat it up, then put in the thing to bake the bread. and she get the bush and cover it. I can tell you, the lines from the kids in the village to taste my grandmother bread used to be long. For some reason, maybe the bush had some super thing in it. You know, maybe it was a forerunner to marijuana, I don't know. But the line used to be long and nobody used to complain. They come back the next time. Now think about all the changes that took place within the drug environment. Think about the resources that had to be used to stop a few drugs on the block. Just to stop drugs from going to mainland USA. And with all of this, because they make that many changes in the states, the islands had to adjust. Enforcing laws, if not done properly, has its problems. Not just making a popular statement, like I heard a leader a few weeks ago saying to the police officers then that if you find a man with a spliff, leave him. But it's not that easy because those things are on the law. It's there. You know, you have to make the necessary amendment to get it off the law, to make it a safe environment. Otherwise, the issue of law enforcement becomes problematic. Because enforcement is led by intelligence. So what do? I might see my cousin with a spliff and I leave him, but I see another individual who is not my cousin and I arrest him. So it becomes problematic. Issues must be identified and dealt with. How we make the country safe is another problem. It takes to another level. Because traffic crimes will step up. Roadside tests are available for DUI, that's driving under the influence. The same is not available to test ingredients in cannabis. Now the force will have to employ what they call recognition experts who are specifically trained to deal with this sort of problem. As drug crimes are not reported, other related crimes have to be looked at. The possibility of property crimes could start going up. Violent crimes could increase because of turf wars. The safety of the community, the villages have to be taken into consideration. More monies from the sale of drugs will be held at home. Home invasions could become a problem. Money laundering could be a headache for the economy. And if we are paying attention to our sister isle in the south some months ago, we'd have heard of a case where over $25 million was found in a house of an individual. They call it susu. So these are some of the things that is going to move with as others think. So it changed the focus and placed the amount of manpower that's involved in spearheading operation on drugs into other types of operation, which is a welcome thing. Now, I would say, in conclusion, that future drug policies must be smarter and more effective in curbing the demands for illegal drugs. It's not something that we could run away from. it is here with us. It is here to stay. It's been here for a very long time. Smarter drug prevention policies should start by reducing drug use among the youths so they would not become future offenders. We must also realize the possibilities that marijuana for medical or general use could increase rather than reduce the addiction among the youths and adults. Those are some of the things we should be mindful of to take us from where we are to where we want to go. We must analyze the issues and make the correct decisions. Thank you very much.
Okay, you next. Thank you, Commissioner Clarkson, for those thought-provoking address. We'll return with questions later. And it is now my distinct pleasure to introduce a member of the Rastafarian community. His name is Ras Nanan, and he is a priest of that community, of that church. Just briefly, the church has been in existence here in Grenada for about 60 years and boasts about 1,000 members to date. So thank you, Ras Nanan. I don't know what is your special title, but you can tell us when you take the podium. Thank you. Welcome.
Give thanks. Okay? One love. My name is Prince Nanan. I am a Nyabingi priest, and an elder, and a patriarch of the ancient order of Melchizedek. I give thanks to the Honorable Sister that invited her here. And I give thanks to all the people that are here, those who give contribution, those who give special speeches. It's a joy to be here and a great opportunity to represent the Rastafarian community. So I say, one perfect love. The ancient order of the Nyabingi is a specific Rastafari movement. And for many years, I was taught by the ancients that ganja is the healing of the nation, which is called marijuana. In our tabernacle, I use the holy herb as a sacrament. In the true sense, it is a burnt offering. Whenever I exalt Emperor Haile Selassie, our King Creator, we use this herb for specific reasons. For greater interception with our King, for healing cure, for communication with our ancestors, and as a medicine. And I give thanks to Sister Sandra this hour and to all the delegates again, because Rasta hardly get any time or opportunity to defend a cause or to sit up in any council and reason on things pertaining to their affairs, and especially ganja. For many years, Rasta has been persecuted for smoking herb. Rasta have been brutalized and marginalized and been through a lot of hell for marijuana. I give thanks to know that I man live to see the day when our people become conscious and our government and our loved ones come to the understanding that marijuana have some good benefits in it. First of all, in 1920, Henry Ford took marijuana and made the body of a car. In this time, in 2021, marijuana making more than 5,600 different products. Marijuana make paint, it make textile, it make varnish, it make plaster Paris, it make rope, it make sails for the yacht, it make food, flour, oil, cheese, butter, and many other different products that us around here will be dreaming about. It is a special plant, and those who experience using it know how special it is. Because some people never smoke marijuana, they never eat marijuana, they never drink marijuana, so they don't have the experience as the Rastafarian people and other non-Rastas who use it. Because not only Rastas that use marijuana, many people use marijuana. Russia and France went to war over marijuana. When France lost the war at the Battle of Waterloo, they fought over marijuana. Japan invaded China, Manchuria, over marijuana. So marijuana is a very important plant. It is a holy herb. It is a sweet cane. It is the healing of the nation in Revelation. It is the food that the Almighty Creator gave to us. He said, unto the cattle I will give grass, but unto the I and them I will give herbs, and herbs shall be your meat. Chicken and beef is not your meat. Your meat is herbs, pumpkin and callaloo and pepper and all these different things. Rastafari give the people a new way of life. Rastafari is such a wonderful affair, such a beautiful moment, and such a beautiful time. And especially when you burn good herb. Good herb, good herb. Right now, in the Caribbean, there is a great distress. Because you could get cocaine to buy in every little corner, and it's very hard to get marijuana to buy, even in Grenada, especially good herb. And cocaine is something that is imported from South America. And marijuana is a plant that could grow here. And when marijuana is legal in Grenada, everyone will make money. Better schools will be building, better roads, better hospital. This is the thing we need. We don't need marijuana just to smoke. We need marijuana to take the people out of poverty, to take the people out of suffering. What's the state of our economy? What's the state of our people? We need marijuana to be legal right now. And we need the government to establish a moratorium immediately. In the true sense, stop lock up people for ganja until these sessions are accomplished, until everything is fulfilled, come to a complete cycle. The Rastas forgive all them who persecute us. Hundreds of Rastas die. We have no hold no grudge against no one. Millions of Rastas die over marijuana. Our farm, our children went astray, our animals, our herbs, our food. We've been in prison. We've been through death and hell, blood and all manner of detrimental regions where devils and demons speak. We come through all them regions, blood and sweat and tears. But we have no grudge against no one. We never carry hatred. Because when one smoke herb, you become an angel, angelical feelings. There is no evil in you. Marijuana is to heal you, heal the nation, not only from physical sickness, but from mental problem and people that are possessed with devils and demons. When you smoke ganja, you cast out these things. The best bread to eat is a ganja bread, the best cake, and the fudge so sweet and special, the juice, the wine, everything in ganja is special. We're going to make rope here in Grenada. We have the Chinese here. They know about it for thousands of years. They've been taking marijuana and make paper. We need a paper factory here. There is no factory in Grenada. We need to take the ganja seed and export it. That is a business already. We need to take the ganja and make oil. That is a business here already. Not only oil to anoint people, but oil to eat and drink. We need men who cannot sex life are dying out. They need to eat some of the good ganja seeds. Because when you have a bud and you want that bud to sing, you give it ganja seed. And if the rat come at your home, the rat wouldn't eat nothing else but all the ganja seed. It wouldn't even eat the ganja. But it will eat the seed for sure. Give thanks again for the honorable ones that are present and for those who make the contribution and for our ancestors, those who went before us, the Rasses and them who suffer and was persecuted for herbs. We give thanks this hour that people's eyes are opening up and that our vision is coming to a full fulfillment. Grenada is a beautiful country, beautiful land. It is a ganja plantation. Grenada is a ganja plantation because we have sunlight 365 days a year. The people need the crystals in the ganja. The other country exporting ganja to Grenada too, you know, because Grenada importing ganja from foreign. The ganja they call in, they have different names for them, but Grenada importing ganja, and enough for we foreign exchange going out. And Grenada need to produce our own ganja and save some of that foreign exchange, save some of that money. Once I had a good tourist friend. A little time I find I didn't see she in Grenada. 3-4 years I didn't see she come around. But the time I met she, when she returned, I said, girl, long time I didn't see her. Why is that? You done with us wrong here? She said, nah, let me show the eye that. The place I live in right now, ganja is legalized. That is why I'm not coming to Grenada anymore. Because I've been getting too much police harassment over ganja. And the place I live in now, I could go and buy an ounce of ganja and I could smoke freely. So Grenada losing a lot of money in that way. When I go to Jamaica and I see so many people on the airport, I say, wow, people like ants. Or as someone pull I across, he say, Ras, all these people you see coming to Jamaica here, they're coming to smoke some good ganja and take a swim in the sea. We really need to open up the market for these things. We need to get the Chinese who know about the thing, how to make the sale for the yachts. The yachts are coming in here. Grenada need to get itself into this business because it's ganja that making the sale for the yacht. No cotton could make sail to stay on the sea. We need to get ourselves involved in taking marijuana and make cannasol, medication for the eyes, to make soap, to make cream. We need to put industries in the country. And it's marijuana that go and put the industries here. Grenada don't even have a sweetie factory. We become a consuming nation. Marijuana could elevate us. I give thanks again to Sister Sandra and all Miss Ferguson and all our co-workers, and all the delegates. And even we must remember we have a very important lady here with us. We have Desmond Charter's sister here with us. You know, Desmond Charter is a brother who is in Ethiopia right now, but he's a brother that struggle with us, an elder. So I must say that we have a sister here with us, and we give thanks to see that she's making a good contribution towards the races when concerning marijuana. O Haile Selassie, how excellent is thy name in all the earth, who had said thy glory above the heavens, out of the mouth of babes and suckling hast thou ordained strength, that thou might still the enemy and the avenger. When I consider the heavens, the works of thy finger, the moon and the stars which thou hast ordained, what is man that thou art mindful of him, or the son of man thou hast visited him? For thou hast given him dominion over the works of thy hand, thou hast put all things under his feet, all beasts, sheep, oxen, the birds of the air, the fishes of the sea, and whatsoever passes through the path of the sea. O Haile Selassie, how excellent is thy name in all the earth. Give thanks. Rastafari live. Last thing I want to say is that there was a revolution in Grenada, and the Rastas was in the revolution. And also had a dialogue with the deceased Prime Minister, the Honorable Brother Bishop, Comrade Morris. And Comrade Morris called the Rastas at his home, and we sit down and we discuss the marijuana. And he said, Prince Nanan, from today, you and all your brothers and sisters will be able to grow, everybody will be able to grow 14 ganja trees. And that was a great settlement, and we went home rejoicing. And a couple of weeks after, certain radicals say, Prince Nanan, one spliff is too much, and start prosecuting the Rastas over marijuana and put us in Hopeville. I pray this time that the Rastas get some benefit. Give thanks. Haile.
Thank you, Elder Nanan.
Thank you, my beloved.
And I would now like to welcome to the podium our next and final panelist, Mrs. Glenda Mason Francis. Mrs. Mason Francis is an educator, former deputy principal of Grenada Boys Secondary School, and the former principal of the Anglican High School. She is very well known here in Grenada for her contributions to education and to the general society. She has been actively engaged in community work. For example, she's been a founding member of the secondary schools Intercall Games since 1965. She was also a founding member of the Association of Masters and Mistresses since 1966, a member of the Seroptimist International of Grenada from 1973, a representative of the Grenada Union of Teachers, also a member of the Anglican Mothers Union. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Mrs. Glenda Mason Francis to the podium, please. Thank you. So let's see. There she is.
I will go up in my place.
Sit down, man. Keep me company. What are you running away for?
Okay.
She's not here.
An educator, all my life I have been concerned about the young people of our nation, who we should be grooming to become our future leaders. A child and young woman growing up in Grenada, I knew nothing about marijuana. When I went to Monash, Jamaica in 1961, is when I started hearing about it. On the campus, we were exposed to Rastafarians, some of whom were very close to our lecturers and visited the campus regularly. And on weekends at our student union, we danced to the music of the Rastafarians and the great Byron Lee, starting off with the ska, other types of music, and eventually what we know today as reggae. Marijuana was no big thing then. Up to now, I know very little about marijuana. But I have always been opposed to legalizing this substance. And the reason, when I experienced one of my Form 6 students at the Grenada Boys Secondary School, whom we were grooming to become our next island scout. Very intelligent, very well-groomed young man, and his first day in Form 6, fell out and dropped out of school because he started using marijuana and fell by the wayside. I saw quite a few other students, boys complete school, and then they too fell by the wayside. And even one of my girls at Anglican High School, after she left school, she almost became like a pagan because of her influence with marijuana. I have always felt that the people who were pushing for the legalization of marijuana were only after their own personal gain, what they could get out of it, either monetary or they had lands and they could grow it and sell it. However, I began to think again about marijuana. In this island, Grenada, we always do things upside down. What we should do first, we do it last. First of all, we must have discussions and conversations in every corner of our island to inform our people about marijuana, what it is, what are its benefits, and what are its dangers. Both the young and the old need information and education. My younger daughter, Kadeen, introduced me to a good friend of hers, Mr. Williams, Tanisha Williams, and I think he was here today. From conversing with him, I realized there is a lot that we do not know about marijuana. And we should use people like him who have all the information to inform and educate the rest of us. First of all, we need to know the country where marijuana has been legalized. What have they benefited from it? What have been its ups and its downs? Are these countries better off? Have they improved? Or are they worse? Finally, somewhere in the report, I read this quotation. I read this, and I quote, "Traditionally, Caribbean citizens have promoted the use of medicinal properties of marijuana, and this was confirmed by scientific evidence. I grew up with a lot of older people, aged people around me. Family, grandparents, both from my father and mother's side, And I never heard them speak about marijuana. Not even my parents, my aunts, my uncles. We used a lot of herbs and bush for tea, all types of tea. And even when we were sick, they would use all the herbs. I would like to ask that we educate and inform our people and discuss with them all there is to let them know about marijuana before we talk about legalizing. People must know what marijuana is, the good of it, and perhaps what I bad for it. And I would like to ask you all, please, to leave politics completely out of this discussion. Thank you very much.
Like when? As I showed the eye, it is our born sacrament in our tabernacle. It is like how the Christians have the bread and the wine to represent Lord Jesus. The Rasta man have his kuchi and his ganja to represent that said situation, but I call it sacramental. So we pray that marijuana will get a sacramental vibration in this nation, that the Rouses will be no more persecuted, because 13 tabernacles has been destroyed in Grenada. 13 tabernacle has been destroyed by the police, by the SSU, over the said marijuana issue. They visit the Rasta tabernacle, beat the priests, beat the followers, and then destroy the tabernacles. So 13 of our tabernacle has been destroyed. I pray that this inhuman situation has become to abolishment in these hours. Give thanks.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions from members, please? I see we recognize someone on the floor, please.
My name is Cheryl Antoine, and I want to ask the question, why marijuana is being spoken about as a drug. Marijuana only becomes a drug when it is used by the medical people into medication or whatever, but in the true sense, it's a herb because it's a tree. So I don't know why, it's referred to like a drug as towards the drugs. And the next question I want to ask is that I heard the police officer, what's his name again? Yes, Brother Clarkson. I'm very familiar with him because he play a lot of music for me and write music for me. He was saying that because of America, right, the police in Grenada had to take a stand, right, because of America business. When Mr. Clarkson was wearing the uniform of England, so something was wrong already, because you cannot be wearing English uniform and protecting America. And then what I want to find out is that what will Grenada get in, right? How much money, what it is we was really getting by protecting America business. I don't hear that part come. All what I'm hearing is abuse of young people. And I'd like to make another statement to say that marijuana don't make people get mad. When you look at the community, I live in a community where I just move up and down. And people in that community, Rastafarians, are very private people if they want to smoke a spliff. But I've seen men on the street, children coming out to school, and they have their bottle by the road drinking rum and smoking tobacco. So, tobacco is a herb. Rum comes from the cane, which we all know, and it's legal. But a herb that, that people will use for medication purposes and other purposes, you saying to the police that it is a drug, so the police must go and, when I talk about that, I just really feel it because I have a son who's been in prison for all his long years. All his time just because he chose maybe to grow marijuana and brutalized by the police. And all that time is America telling the police to brutalize our citizens. I think we better think. And I think when Grenada and Grenadians is ready to go into the planting of marijuana, that the community that was that been beaten and all of that should be given the opportunity to produce. Because we have youths from Grenada here going to Canada and plant cannabis to make Canada rich, and yet still you saying they cannot plant in their own country, you know? So,
Right,
so I'm wrapping up now. So I'm saying that we need to think about it, because I think that this opportunity is an opportunity for Rastafarians now to make our country rich. Rastafarian, we could make our country rich because we knows how to plant and we know what to do. So we don't need the man up there in Europe or Africa or America to come here and tell us how to cultivate. We're going to do it ourselves and make our country rich. Thank you.
Thank you for that contribution, Ms. Antoine. In relation to questions which were posed about the police interacting with the DEA, I'm afraid that the commissioner unfortunately had to leave. But certainly these are all questions which I am sure would come up again if and when we do get to public consultations, which we hope that in due course the government might see it fit to embark upon. I don't think any of your questions we can put directly to any of the panelists, but certainly they are thought-provoking, and as I say, I'm sure you would have an opportunity to raise them again. It's a pity we did have a medical issue, we did have a panel dealing with the medical issues earlier on, and I am sure when you revisit this session, those sessions, you will get some enlightenment, if I may say so, without the need for the good drug to help you with that. Thank you.
I feel I could tell you something.
Huh?
Can I tell you something? No. Okay. Well.
Do we have any more
Yes.
questions, please?
Yes, good afternoon.
Yes, thank you.
You know, I sat at the back and I listened.
Sorry, could I hear your name, please?
Yeah, the name is Richie Oliver.
Thank you.
I sat at the back there and I listened, and my phone was inundated with text messages and calls. And I will ask the hard question here this afternoon. We speak in glowing terms, and I'm not doubting that there is some benefit to come out of the marijuana plant. Indeed. And I think there are benefits. But I want to look at it holistically. Are we, as much as we are preaching the legislation and we would like to legalize certain portions of marijuana, are we ready in the OECD in particular and in the Caribbean? And I bring it right here at home in Grenada. Are we ready for that, really? And I ask that in the context, we know that there are persons who can smoke 100 spliff and they are good. And there are persons who would only smoke one and they are not good. Are we ready? Oh yes, and that happens too. Are we ready? Do we have the facilities here in Grenada home? Do we have the expertise at home? Do we have the facilities and expertise to take care of those who cannot deal with it? They tried to use it on 1 or 2 occasions and it did not treat them well. We would not like to get into the different, how should I say it, the different things that would happen to them. Most of us here, let us not fool ourselves. We know exactly what happens. So I'm asking the hard question here this afternoon. As much as we would like to do what we say we would like to do, are we ready? Structure-wise, and are we ready? Do we have the expertise to help coach or help to psychologically the persons who might be affected to deal with the problems that would arrive out of that. Thank you.
Wait, sorry, let's just deal with this question first. No, I'll deal with that. Again, I have to say that having regard to the remit of this panel, this really is a question which falls under the umbrella of the earlier panel today, which was dealing with health, children, youth, and other social considerations. So again, sir, we will have to, I'm sure all those questions have been logged, and we, on our panel here, we do not have the expertise to answer that question. So we will certainly table it. Thank you. Yes, recognize another questioner, please. Thank you.
From St. Patrick's, representing the House of the Nabingi again. Yeah, what the brother said, they might be looking true. People make statements that look true but not true. The law on marijuana is destroying more of our citizens than if it is legalized right now. The law they have presently, what I established at this moment, is causing more harm mentally, physically, financially, any way you want to put it. Domestically, is destroying the people more. The study on marijuana has proven that mental disability is 0%. 0%. So is the stress from places like America and England, like what she was just explaining, when America indulged itself in wrongdoing and spit it out on me, we've been stressed out. This is what causing the mental disabilities, not marijuana. Let's don't blame marijuana and let's go forward with the project. The project is blessed and it's good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baptiste. Yes, sorry, could we hear from this gentleman, please?
Give thanks. Good evening once again. Rasmanai from the House of the Nayabingi. What I really have to say now is that marijuana has been around so long, so many years. We can't even don't count years marijuana been around. And look to today, we have a crop they call the sauersup crop, right? Going on with sauersup. And sauersup in Grenada is being exported all over the world. And it is known as one of the #1 main cancer element or whatsoever we call it, healing product, right? No study have done on sauersup in Grenada and probably other countries, much. Probably they just do a study based on the cancer and different things like that to prove that sauersup is so good for cancer and all them things. But we have hundreds of farmers planting thousands upon thousands of sauersup trees. Yeah? This is a crop that people looking to create a serious investment in. But marijuana been around so long, and up to now, Grenada or the government of Grenada can't even set up a study, a base, where we could do a study based on marijuana. And Rastas in Grenada have been pleading so long for the legalization of marijuana or for the government to look into legalizing marijuana or decriminalizing marijuana. So the question I'm asking, why is this study taking so long so that the government could put in place certain regulations that marijuana could be legal in Grenada? Marijuana, and next thing again I have to say, I have a brethren, a Rasta brethren who grew up here in Grenada, and he now come from university in Canada, who just done a study on marijuana, the whole production of marijuana from the seed go right up to the plant, to the distribution and all them things there. And he now finished with his degree and diploma and all them things there. So we have people, not to say we don't have people, and not only one person we got many people out there who doing studies based on marijuana. So we need to try to set up some things that even people in Grenada could be innovated and even get places that we could study here to bring this thing forward. Because the government delaying with this thing too much, you know what I mean? So we need to fasten up the production, and while we say that we are ready, we might be looking scrawny and like we don't know what's going on, or we don't know how to set up our production and all them things, but we are ready. Just as any other businessman is ready, just so the Rassis and other people dealing with marijuana are ready to take this into, you know, a full initiative. So give thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Are we time?
Marijuana or any of those that side of things, because it cost $120 per man to keep them up there per day in all the resources and everything to support a prisoner up there. So from the legal standpoint, looking at the overcrowding of the prison and the court systems that we have as well, the part of the mental capacities of persons and psychological breakdowns and different things. I think we need support for that regardless of marijuana or not. We have incidences of bipolar, you know, manic depressive. We have a lot of incidences of those sort of things, and we give no credence to mental health. But if you understand, and this comes from knowledge from the lady who was the principal, she's right. It is knowledge that we need, because we will look, if we understood what happened during the Cartagena affair, we'd realize the emphasis was on cocaine, not on marijuana. Marijuana just got shuffled in there as part of the drug culture that they spoke of. The second thing is, we also need to know, she calls for ongoing research. She's so very right. We need ongoing research of what's going on in the world and where we sit with that. Because this big thought of it being a big bucks industry does not really fly in the places that they were supposed to be happening in. However, the decriminalization is being pushed forward in several countries and on a global platform as well. We want to look at that. We also want to make sure that we understand what our market possibilities if we engage. We tend to be too big and expect not to fail instead of creeping to get there with niche products, as we were talking about. I sent to the persons on the Zoom link a link to Amazon, just putting in the search for hemp products. And it's amazing the number of things that you can get in there. That's the variety of the market that we can best handle in small little doses. And we can follow the things like the chocolate factories, how many of them we've had, and how niche they were, and how successful they are, because our environment will never be able to take that. We will also have to look at legal ramifications on the environmental interest as well, and environmental degradation as well. But most of all, I want to go back to Richie and what he said about the communities. I am accustomed seeing more men from River Road, Darbo, Coffee Bowl. The names are very distinct where they come from, when they're in the prison. St. David's, they're very distinct. And so we want to look at the fact, and I'm also aware and understanding by people that I know, that it happens in Lansepine, but we get no mention of these people at all. They don't get held, you know? So we want a just, equitable system for something that could be perhaps profitable. Instead of the witch hunt, look to find knowledge. Where can we benefit?
Thank
How can
you.
it be equitable?
Thank you. I must interrupt you. We are taking questions. Your contribution is valued, but I think we might have other questions from the floor, so I do thank you for your contributions. Yes, do we have any more questions? Thank you.
Contributions.
Yes, sorry, please direct questions to the moderator. We'll recognize you and then you may come to the podium and ask your question, please. So, sir, thank you. Sorry, madam.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm Empress Mutaro from the Nabingi House and also a member of the Rastafari Organization for Centralization. And I'm asking that question to Mr. Maitland. He said that Grenada is one of the last countries to have this type of forum. I want to know why we as Grenadians should be the last, you know? Is it that we get the most brutalization, or is it that we cannot grow our hub freely? Or is it that the government don't give us the time to recognize us as Rasta towards the hub? So I just want to ask Mr. Maitland if he could answer this question for us, please. We want to know why we should be the last, when we should be the first. Bless up.
Thank you, Ms. Muta. If Mr. Maitland is still with us, maybe he might care to volunteer and answer some thoughts on this question of why Grenada is the last one to embark on legislation to decriminalize or legalize marijuana. Thank you, Mr. Maitland.
Yeah, legislation or political commitment, because for instance, in the case of Barbados, they haven't yet passed legislation, but they've given a political commitment to do so by next month. And I really don't have any good reason except that there isn't sufficient political will. As in, I get the impression that by and large, the other governments have felt the mood of their population, of their constituents, have felt that the world has shifted and is continuing to shift, and that they will just get behind as archaeological politicians if they don't go with the flow. And for many people, this is a political issue. This is a politically important issue, and so they have looked at the world trend and listened to their populations and moved forward, whereas Grenadian politicians, I think, for whatever reason, have not come to a similar realization, or perhaps it is in combination with the fact that we have a quite powerful church lobby here, which is also very politically active, perhaps in a sense that other countries don't. So those are the two things I can really offer as an explanation. But it would be best for a politician to answer that.
If I am going according to the agenda I have before me, it seems to indicate that this is the end of the plenary session, questions and answers. And if that is so, then essentially my duty now is to thank everyone who participated in this panel. So just a quick recall. I thank Mr. Maitland, Commissioner. Sorry, you were the, okay. All right, I am overstepping my jurisdiction, I am told, so I bow gratefully to the chair here. Thank you.
Okay. I think I could refer to you as Justice. It stays with you. Right. I think this has been a great session. This has been a movement. Think of it years ago where you would not dare to have a forum of this nature to discuss this issue. And this is notwithstanding some persons may feel that, you know, they didn't get to hear what they wanted to, but I think having brought this thing to a discussion of this nature, a discourse of this nature, sponsored by what I call the policy making arms within the region is a good move. And in this last session, I listened to people who have been on different sides. Mr. Clarkson, Commissioner Clarkson, brought a perspective of how this thing emerged in latter years within a framework of policing. It was how it was pushed. Rasnanan, it is a pleasure to meet you. I heard of you, and I'm very touched by the testimony you gave about your experience. First of all, of a promise that was made to you at the highest level, and then at the same time how you suffered incarceration. I think the presentation by our legal luminary, Richie, addressed this issue of human rights. Now, laws are made and laws are changed. It is driven by how society progresses and when society decides that existing laws can no longer meet its needs. Now, I have heard Rasnanan with my ears, and I would say with my own good two ears, refer to an accommodation. Now, I use the term we're looking for to decriminalize. And he's saying we need to have a discussion as to how we should proceed. And I think this is a very responsible statement. It does not represent anger, but it is a wish to bring the process of criminalizing the use of marijuana to a standstill. There are opportunities and there are concerns. Educator Mrs. Mason, she brought a perspective of her experience in education. Now, these are real. These are not make-believe. These are real. And in any society, you should not impose the will of a stronger set on the wishes of anyone. This thing calls for discussion and discourse as we go forward. It is not about how much money you would make, how much money you would not make, but we recognize that within the present construct, there is a problem. And the problem is a whole generation, a generation, 2 generations probably, has been criminalized. And we have been losing our young men and women to the prison. I don't know how much we have lost to the use of marijuana, but we have sent them to a school where they came out not what they went in as, but they came out totally tutored for a different occupation. At this stage, it is not my wish to continue, but I would like to thank those who sponsored this session for bringing this matter into the public so that we can have a discussion of all the stakeholders who are brave enough, and I use the word brave enough, within this space to meet and have a frank discussion as to the issues, the challenges, and some of the fears that we face going forward. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for being here, and I thank you for listening in this long session. Thank you.
please.
Okay.
Nothing here. Yes, hello. We need to just pull it together. And before she says anything, I want to really recognize this lady here. Ras Nanan mentioned her with great affection, and without her, this would not have happened. So we really owe her a tremendous debt of gratitude for all the work that she put into it. And on behalf of the partner agency with her, I want to thank her very, very much. We also have to thank our technical people here, Richie Olivieri, always competent, and his friends. And I hope you heard the contribution that he made, because I know it means a lot to him. So I will ask Sandra to wrap up with some closing remarks.
Thank you, Bishop Harvey. It has been a very long day, but I trust all of you who have been here and those of you online think that it was a day well spent, and that you heard, the discussion was significant. On behalf of the Interagency Group of Development Organizations, I want to thank the CCG for coming on board with us and being a partner in this exercise. I also want to recognize the support of the non-state actors panel, and I particularly want to thank the officer because this is through the European Development Fund. I wish to express our thanks to Ms. Nicole Garway at the EDF SSU office. We would have explained, I think, that from the time we heard consultations, we thought that this was an opportunity, because though this report had been in place since 2018, it had never been brought out, there has never placed in the public domain. And this has not been a consultation. It is not the perfect event, and I must apologize for being late this morning. I am not normally late, but I apologize, and I apologize to my partners and to everybody else who I delayed. So our intention was to have this, what we call a round table, to present the information, that you could have the information. And we are very fortunate to have had it from no less a person than the chair of the commission herself. And you already know she's in hospital. So when I called her this week, and because I knew she had been in a vehicular accident, and I wasn't able to get in contact with her, and I managed to get her sister, who was going to the hospital to see her. And she said to me, don't worry, I could present it. There is nothing wrong with my head. And I felt this enormous burden. I am so happy that we would have heard her. We could not have gotten a better presentation, very comprehensive. I want to thank all of the distinguished panelists for sharing their time with us, every one of you, but I particularly want to mention, Reverend Mark, who was supposed to be part of the panel, but his mom died, so he couldn't make it. And we express our condolences, and to Mrs. Mason Francis, who also had an accident and was not able to be here, but readily agreed to do it from home. And thank you, Richie, and the technical team for making this possible. Thank you for Beverly, Island Media, And we have 3 organizations that have committed some sponsorship, additional sponsorship, because when we had to move it to the Trade Center, and then when we had to have a virtual meeting, of course, the cost, went up significantly. So I want to thank everyone for your contribution to what I consider a really well worth it, an investment in a significant activity like this. This is now only the beginning, and I hope you are much better equipped to participate in the consultations. We are going to try to make the proceedings available so that you will be able to reference it and have that information and share it in your groups and promote and facilitate discussion. So I just want to thank everybody for today. And Rasnang, thank you very much. I am honored.